Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the foggy, gaslit streets of Victorian Britain, a place where the air was thick with coal dust, morals were thin, and just about everyone was on something. Tonight is all about drugs in the Victorian era. The real, weird, mind-bending, sometimes accidentally exploding pharmaceutical buffet that kept Victorian society spinning. Before you drift off, do me a small favor and tap the like button and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, flip on a fan for that gentle background hum, and tuck yourself under the sheets. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how Victorians coped with stress before self-care meant 10 streaming services and a $45 scented candle? What did people do when their teeth hurt, their nerves were frayed, or they just wanted to escape the horror of another family dinner? Was everyone really sipping morphine and calling it a tonic? Could you walk into a pharmacy and walk out with a bottle of cocaine toothache drops, no questions asked? Was Grandma high, or just pretending to enjoy her boiled cabbage again? And most importantly, would you survive a day in Victorian Britain without accidentally overdosing on something that sounded like a Hogwarts ingredient list? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1857 London. Your head hurts, your neighbour's ferret is coughing again, and your local chemist greets you by name. Good luck. Victorian mornings begin with a generous splash of laudanum, a glorious blend of opium and alcohol, dropped into tea, baby bottles, and, sometimes, the family soup. Doctors prescribe it for coughs, headaches, existential dread, and mild inconveniences. You take your first sip, and suddenly your worries about the rent and the cholera outbreak feel delightfully far away. Let's set the scene. It's breakfast at your cramped London townhouse. The gas lamp flickers, the wallpaper is peeling, and the neighbours are already arguing about whose turn it is to shovel horse droppings off the stoop. On the table, a crust of stale bread, a cup of black tea, and a tiny brown bottle with a label that basically says, "Why not? Laudanum, the miracle medicine." It's 10% opium, 90% Victorian optimism, and it tastes like regret soaked in sherry. You reach for it without thinking, the way you'd reach for coffee today. Only this is coffee that would make you forget you're even late for work. A few drops in your tea, and the world blurs at the edges. Your screaming toddler? Blissfully snoozing thanks to a few drops slipped into his milk. The cat's yowling? Laudanum probably works on animals too. But you're not quite ready to share your secret stash with Whiskers just yet. Victorian doctors love laudanum. They prescribe it for nearly everything: toothaches, insomnia, menstrual cramps, wounded pride, female troubles, boredom, and of course, the infamous nervous complaint. Your neighbour, Mrs. Parker, swears it helped her bunions. Your uncle used it for gout. Your Aunt Edna takes it for delicate nerves, which as far as you can tell means she's tired of living with Uncle Alfred. Even your local poet claims laudanum is the secret to writing 5 sad sonnets before breakfast. But laudanum is more than just a quick fix, it's a lifestyle. You find yourself calculating how many errands you can run before it wears off. The answer? None. But you try anyway. Your walking pace slows, your worries melt, and even the foul River Thames seems picturesque in the hazy morning light. You could almost forget the city's constant noise, the clang of distant factories, and the haunting bell of the nearby undertaker, already wheeling away another victim of Victorian living. Let's talk side effects, because the Victorians sure didn't. Sure, you're not in pain anymore. In fact, you can't really feel anything below your chin. Time becomes slippery. You spend the afternoon reading the same paragraph in your penny dreadful, and wonder why the villain never gets any closer to finishing his evil plot. Later, you decide to get some fresh air, only to realize you've been staring out the same window for 3 hours, hypnotized by a pigeon with commitment issues. The real risk isn't immediate, of course. After all, laudanum is completely legal and sold over the counter, at every respectable chemist and corner grocer. No prescription needed, just a few coins and a friendly smile. Addiction? That's just another word for regular customer. If you start feeling jumpy, anxious, or your vision takes on the sepia tone of an old photograph, you just add another dash to your tea. Problem solved. Still, there's something almost comforting about this daily ritual. Life in Victorian Britain is relentless. Smog, debt, unwashed socks, unsolicited advice from distant relatives. Laudanum doesn't fix anything, but it makes everything feel possible. You might even write a letter to the editor about reform, or finally tackle that mountain of laundry. More likely, you'll take another nap and dream about a world with slightly less horse manure. And so, the bottle sits on the mantel, right next to the family Bible, the only two things guaranteed to bring comfort. As the day fades into a foggy evening, you pour one last dose and toast to Victorian resilience, the art of carrying on, one dreamy opiated cup at a time. Step into a smoke-filled East End cellar, where the air is thick enough to chew and dreams leak through the floorboards. Here, you stretch out on a battered sofa and share a pipe with strangers, drifting into a blissful haze as your wallet quietly disappears. It's socializing, Victorian style. Say little, drool a lot. Let's take you there. Second person, shoes sticking to the floor. You duck through a battered wooden door, the street noise swallowed by heavy curtains. Instantly, your nose twitches at a fug of incense, lamp oil, and something that might be week-old cabbage. Or perhaps it's just someone's coat. The ceiling is low, the wallpaper peeling, and every surface is a mosaic of stains in colours that defy the natural spectrum. Congratulations, you're in an authentic Victorian opium den, a cross between a living room and a chemistry experiment gone wrong. The regulars eye you, or at least try to. Most are somewhere between awake and astral projection. You weave past a pair of gentlemen who might be bankers, philosophers, or just really lost. There's a painter sprawled in the corner, humming to himself and sketching the same 3 lines on a crumpled napkin. Every table has a mismatched teacup filled with something murky, and at least one dozing patron who's forgotten their own name. You flop down on a patched velvet sofa, the kind that would probably qualify as an archaeological find if it ever saw daylight. Someone passes you a long pipe, ornate, delicate, and sticky. The ritual begins. You heat a sliver of opium over a candle, inhale slowly, and wait for the world to slip its moorings. The first breath is sharp and bitter, but soon the taste disappears behind a tidal wave of numbness. A soft, warm fog settles into your bones. Every sound becomes a gentle echo. Every worry floats away, and even your itchy socks no longer bother you. Conversation is optional and usually impossible. Victorian etiquette evaporates here. Nobody's comparing family pedigrees or debating the correct angle for a calling card. Instead, you share a companionable silence broken only by the clink of glass, the hiss of matches, and the occasional poetic mumble. Your mind wanders. Maybe you remember a childhood pet, or the fact that you meant to pay your rent yesterday. Doesn't matter now. The world outside feels about as real as a novel you once read and forgot to finish. Time is elastic in the den. An hour drips by, or maybe it's 3. Occasionally someone rouses enough to stagger out, shoes missing, hat on backwards, eyes the colour of rainwater. The proprietor, a silent shadow with the stamina of a caffeinated bat, moves through the gloom, collecting coins, replenishing pipes, and making sure nobody accidentally sets themselves on fire. A good den keeper knows how to keep things just legal enough to avoid the police, but just shady enough to attract the poets. You watch as the line between dream and reality bends. Some patrons chase visions, gorgeous colours swirling in the gaslight, phantom music playing from nowhere. Others simply nap, faces slack and peaceful, achieving the elusive Victorian goal of rest without responsibility. It's cheaper than a holiday, and, if you ignore the risk of arrest, theft, or a truly legendary hangover, almost as restorative. Let's be clear. Opium dens are not glamorous. You're lying on a questionable sofa next to a stranger snoring in Morse code. The air is so thick, you can bite it, and the risk of tuberculosis is only slightly lower than the risk of being bored to death by a philosophy student on his third pipe. But for a few hours you float. The misery of the factory, the nagging of the landlord, the bleak British drizzle, all fade out to static. When you finally stagger outside, the city is quieter, the world softer, and your wallet lighter. You vow never to return. You'll be back tomorrow. Victorian self-care. Dream big, drool quietly, and always check your pockets. Forget flossing. You just dab a little cocaine on your gums, and suddenly you can't feel your face, let alone your dental pain. Victorians also use it for shyness, exhaustion, or to prepare for a really long, awkward dinner with the in-laws. Honestly, why brush when you can numb? Welcome to the medical marvel of the late Victorian age. Over-the-counter cocaine. The original all-in-one solution for everything from dental emergencies to social anxiety, and, because it's Victorian England, also for anything described as female nerves, melancholia, or the persistent feeling that your hat is too tight. You pop by your local chemist, ask for something for your toothache, and walk out with a tiny glass vial and an enthusiastic recommendation. It's 1890, and everybody's feeling just a little bit more energetic than usual. Dentists absolutely adore this stuff. You walk in with a cavity the size of a shilling and leave floating on a cloud of chemically induced indifference. The dentist smears cocaine on your gums, your lip goes numb, and suddenly, dentistry isn't so bad after all. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, just pure, pharmaceutical-grade confidence. Your dentist might even send you home with a sample so you can keep the good times rolling in the comfort of your own parlor. And it doesn't stop at toothaches. Are you feeling awkward at your cousin's engagement party? Cocaine? Got the mid-afternoon yawns after a morning spent dodging manure carts and judgmental glances from your neighbor? Cocaine. Want to impress your boss at the office with tireless work and alarming punctuality? There's a bottle for that. Victorian advertisements promise that cocaine will banish all sensation of fatigue, cheer the melancholic, and restore vigor to the most listless of spirits. Is it a wonder potion or just really, really good marketing? Yes. You might be wondering, what about side effects? Victorians are too, but mostly in the sense that they're excited to try new ones. Tingling? Delightful. Sudden urge to clean the entire house at 2 a.m. Highly productive. The inability to stop talking about your ideas for inventing a self-ironing cravat? Finally, the family listens. And when the effects wear off, no problem, just dab on a little more, right before your next social engagement, or after, or both. Cocaine isn't just for the home crowd either. It's the darling of Victorian explorers, mountain climbers, and anyone unfortunate enough to be alive before the invention of reliable coffee. Sir Ranulph Fiennes probably never climbed Everest, but if he had, he would have packed a hearty supply. Victorian hikers chew cocaine-laced lozenges to brave the chilly winds of the Scottish Highlands, and to forget, temporarily, that their boots are 80% holes. Even the Queen's physicians are in on the act. Her Majesty's special tonic contains a suspiciously invigorating blend of wine and coca leaves. It's prescribed for everything from delicate nerves to the persistent existential horror of living in an age where the average life expectancy is basically one bad winter. You take a sip, and suddenly it's much easier to ignore the coal smoke, the rats in the walls, and the fact that the family dog is still using the sitting room rug as his personal bathroom. If you're a little anxious, socially awkward, or simply tired of the Victorian grind, cocaine is the great equalizer. No longer must you suffer in silence through small talk or contemplate running away from your own dinner party. A discreet pinch on the gums, and you're transformed, cheerful, chatty, and ever so slightly unstoppable. Your problems melt away, your gums go numb, and, for a brief moment, You're convinced you could give a speech in Parliament, or at least survive another game of charades. In the end, maybe cocaine doesn't solve your problems, but it sure makes you forget you had them. Your mouth is numb, your nerves are soothed, and your sense of Victorian decorum is, temporarily, out the window. Dentistry will never be the same. Sleep well, and remember, some smiles are best left numb. Sleep doesn't come easy when you live above a busy street full of horses, hawkers, and 3 a.m. accordion concerts. Enter chloral hydrate, a new miracle sedative. Just one spoonful and you drift off to sleep, possibly until the next coronation. Let's get comfortable. You've spent the day inhaling coal smoke, your hair smells like fried fish, and the neighbours in flat 2B are arguing about whose turn it is to empty the chamber pot. It's midnight. The oil lamp flickers, and the only thing more persistent than your anxiety is the sound of carriage wheels scraping cobblestones outside your window. You toss, you turn, you count sheep, until you remember that, in Victorian England, sheep mostly count you. But tonight, you have a secret weapon. Chloral hydrate. Bottled hope, fresh from the apothecary. The label reads for sleeplessness, nerves, and general agitation, which, if you're honest, is your entire personality after sunset. You pour a spoonful into a glass, swirl it with whatever's left of the sherry, and offer a silent thanks to the enterprising chemist who decided the human brain could be fixed with a clever molecule and a strong enough placebo effect. The taste is, well, chemical, slightly sweet, faintly medicinal, like drinking the ghost of a cough syrup that's seen too much. But the effect is pure magic. In a few minutes, your eyelids grow heavy. The relentless tick-tock of the mantel clock slows to a gentle lull, and even the persistent smell of boiled cabbage from downstairs can't keep you awake. The city's noise blurs into a distant, soothing hum. The horses fade to a memory, the accordion mutates into a lullaby, and even the upstairs neighbour, who seems to take up midnight furniture rearranging as a competitive sport, becomes nothing but a shadow in a dream. Victorian doctors are thrilled with chloral hydrate. It's the first truly reliable sedative, a sleep aid without the poetic messiness of laudanum or the criminal undertones of opium dens. Chloral hydrate is modern, respectable, and not at all the sort of thing that might cause you to wake up in a different century. Prescribed for nervous disorders, insomnia, and, occasionally, for simply being too alive, it quickly finds a home on every bedside table from Mayfair mansions to soot-stained boarding houses. Everyone has a story. Your friend Margaret takes it so she can sleep through her husband's enthusiastic snoring. Your brother-in-law uses it before big meetings with his boss, claiming that the secret to confidence is 8 uninterrupted hours of chemically assisted slumber. Even the family dog gets a taste, just a little, mixed into his gravy, to stop him from howling at the full moon and the constable's hat. Let's talk side effects. Yes, you wake up groggy. Sometimes you can't quite remember what you dreamt, or if you actually dreamt at all. There's a faint sense that your brain has been wrapped in a velvet blanket, soft, but also slightly suffocating. Some mornings you linger in a pleasant fog, not quite sure if you're awake, asleep, or just existing in a third state reserved for Victorians and overtired modern commuters. But really, who's complaining? The ability to sleep through an entire parade, 3 domestic arguments, and a surprise visit from your aunt, who loves nothing more than 5 a.m. Storytelling is a blessing you don't take lightly. Besides, if you oversleep and miss work, you can always blame the fog, or the cat, or Victorian medicine in general. Chloral hydrate is not just a drug, it's a declaration. I will sleep, and nothing, certainly not the racket outside, nor the existential terror of industrial Britain, will stop me. If you drift off and miss the next royal wedding, well, it's probably for the best. So, one last yawn, one last spoonful. Sleep tight, insomniac. History is full of restless nights. But tonight, you're not one of them. Teething pains, Restless baby? Just give the child a few drops of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, an over-the-counter concoction loaded with morphine. Victorian parents swear by it. Victorian children don't, because they're asleep. Let's picture it. Your household is a tornado of cranky toddlers, creaking floorboards, and the distant sound of a neighbour's cat expressing its opinions on moonlight. You've tried everything. Lullabies, gentle rocking, scolding, promising your offspring a pony if they'll just close their eyes. But Victorian parenting is not for the faint of heart, and at a certain point, every mother reaches for the same little glass bottle in the medicine chest. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. It's the original sleep mode, long before tablets and gentle rain soundtracks. The label promises miracles, relief from teething, colic, hiccups, mysterious Victorian illnesses like the vapours, and, if you read between the lines, general child-related chaos. 1 teaspoon and your child is transformed from wailing banshee to angelic cherub. It's not magic, it's morphine. And in Victorian Britain, that's basically the same thing. Administering the syrup is a ritual. You measure out a careful spoonful, ignoring the very scientific just eyeball it method. The smell is faintly sweet, herbal, and tinged with the ineffable scent of quiet. Within minutes, your tiny human's eyelids grow heavy, the whimpering subsides, and the house is blessedly, gloriously peaceful. For the first time all week, you can hear yourself think. You can also hear the sound of every other mother on the street breathing a collective sigh of relief. Let's not sugarcoat it. Victorian parenting is a marathon without snacks. There are no disposable nappies, no child-proof locks, no parenting books except the Bible, and if you're lucky, a dog-eared copy of Mrs. Beeton's. A fussy child at night means the whole household is awake. Siblings, grandparents, the lodger you forgot was living in the attic. With 1 dose of soothing syrup, the baby drifts off, and you finally have a chance to address the other pressing issues of Victorian life, like scrubbing coal dust off the curtains or hiding from your landlord. Doctors adore Mrs. Winslow's. Pharmacists recommend it. Grandmothers pass down secret tips about how to make the effect last through Sunday sermon. The recipe, a mix of morphine, alcohol, and gentle Victorian denial, quickly becomes the go-to for every family with a restless little one. The syrup is marketed as harmless and entirely safe, which, in Victorian language, means nobody's asked too many questions yet. There's even an entire advertising campaign featuring happy, rosy-cheeked babies and angelic mothers, looking far more rested than reality allows. Posters boast that Mrs. Winslow's quietly soothes and relieves the bowels. No mention of what happens if you accidentally double dose, but that's a worry for another century. For now, the only thing you care about is sleep, glorious sleep. Side effects? Well, they're mostly ignored. Children are quieter, sleepier, less likely to get into the coal scuttle. Some seem so soothed they barely wake for breakfast. But in a time before child psychology or even regular hand washing, peace and quiet trump minor concerns like consciousness. And so, bedtime in the Victorian era becomes a remarkably peaceful affair. The baby snoozes. The parents collapse into chairs. The air is filled with a sense of accomplishment and the faint, ever-present aroma of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. You pat yourself on the back, close your eyes, and, for just a little while, pretend you've got it all figured out. Sleep well, little one. The Victorian night is long, the walls are thin, but at least tonight, thanks to Mrs. Winslow, everyone is getting some rest. Nothing says let's have fun like passing around a soaked handkerchief at a garden party. Whether you're a surgeon, a student, or just bored at a dance, ether brings people together, in a haze of confusion and giggles. Let's set the scene. You're attending a respectable Victorian soiree, the kind where the punch is tepid, the dancing is enthusiastic but slightly off rhythm, and your neighbour insists on retelling the same story about his cousin's railway accident. It's a long evening ahead, but fortunately, your hostess has a secret weapon stashed in the conservatory. a delicate glass bottle of ether. Officially, it's for medical emergencies. Unofficially, it's the most exciting thing to happen since last year's hedgehog race. Soon, someone produces a lacy handkerchief and discreetly dabs it with ether, holding it up with a conspiratorial wink. You're not sure what to expect. Maybe a little dizziness, a little light-headedness, a brief escape from the endless poker. Instead, you inhale and suddenly the walls go fuzzy, your knees wobble, and everything is hilarious. The flowers in the centerpiece are whispering secrets. Your aunt's laugh sounds like a kettle whistling underwater, and the hostess's hat appears to be floating slightly above her head. You collapse gracefully onto a fainting couch, giggling with a group of new best friends, none of whose names you will remember by morning. Ether isn't just a parlor game for the bored upper classes. It's a medical marvel too. Victorian surgeons sing its praises. Before ether, surgery was a desperate race against pain, held down by 4 strong assistants and a bottle of gin. You'd be lucky to survive the operation and the hangover. Now, with ether, the patient drifts off to a peaceful nothingness, blissfully unaware as doctors do their best to improve whatever's wrong with you, Victorian style. Of course, that doesn't mean surgery is safe. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's still a good chance you'll wake up missing an extra limb, but at least you didn't scream the wallpaper off the walls. Surgeons are delighted. Patients are groggy. Everybody wins. Ether becomes the go-to for tooth extractions, amputations, and, if you're a particularly nervous bride, occasionally even wedding nights. Students and medical apprentices quickly catch on to ether's more recreational possibilities. Chemistry class becomes a lot more interesting when the laboratory assistants are chasing each other around with bottles of the stuff, dissolving in fits of laughter at jokes about potassium. University parties evolve. Instead of sherry and tedious conversation, there's a round of who can hold their breath the longest before giggling uncontrollably. If you lose, you faint. If you win, you also faint, but with style. Ether is, in some ways, the great social equalizer. Rich or poor, anxious or exuberant, everyone agrees on one thing. Life's worries seem a lot smaller with a nose full of volatile chemicals. Stressed about the coming industrial revolution? Ether. Sick of the cousin who plays the accordion at midnight? Ether. Curious about the world beyond the garden hedge but too shy to ask? You guessed it, ether. Are there drawbacks? Of course. The aftermath is less glamorous. You might wake up on the grass with your hat on backwards, or discover you've confessed your undying love to the family spaniel. Occasionally, the party ends with someone fainting dramatically into the shrubbery, or a guest attempting to waltz with the grandfather clock. The neighbours talk, but honestly, they're jealous they weren't invited. But for a brief, intoxicating spell, ether turns the humdrum Victorian evening into something approaching joy. You return to reality with a smile, slightly dizzy, certain that, if only for a moment, everything was light, silly, and full of possibility. Ether, because sometimes history's greatest medical breakthrough is also the life of the party. Before there were trendy cocktails, there was gin, cheap, powerful, and everywhere. You drink it to forget your troubles, and then drink more to forget you drank it. By morning, the hangover is legendary, and the solution is more gin. Let's paint the picture. It's a chilly evening in Victorian London, the kind where the fog seeps into your bones and every street lamp glows like an accusation. Your job is uncertain, your rent's overdue, and your neighbour has just been promoted to local character by virtue of yelling at pigeons for 3 hours straight. What do? You wander down a narrow alley, dodging puddles of mysterious origin, and find yourself at the entrance to a gin shop, a haven for the worn, the weary, and the absolutely done with this century. Inside, the light is dim, the air is thick with laughter, complaints, and a general miasma of disappointment. The bartender gives you a look that says join the club, then sloshes a generous measure of gin into a chipped glass. It burns on the way down, but you can almost feel it working, like a tiny squad of liquid optimists marching through your veins, promising you that tomorrow will probably not be worse. Probably. Gin is everywhere. Mothers drink it to steady their nerves. Fathers drink it to forget their jobs, or lack thereof. Kids might not drink it, but they definitely know the smell, sharp, herbal, like a pine forest set on fire and extinguished in regret. It's called Mother's Ruin, and if that sounds dramatic, you haven't met a Victorian mother 3 gins deep. The government tries to intervene, but the people just switch to new recipes, new back-alley stills, new ways to turn potatoes, grains, or leftover sadness into something drinkable. You notice that nobody sips gin here. There are no delicate garnishes, no umbrella-topped cocktails, just mugs and throats and the immediate pursuit of numbness. You down another round. Conversation loosens, laughter rises, and for a brief, shining moment, you forget that your boots are wet and your prospects are drier than the gin itself. The gin shop is a study in Victorian sociology. There's a banker crying in the corner about his lost investments, a pair of chimney sweeps arm wrestling for half a pie, and an old woman quietly humming God Save the Queen as she lines up her empty glasses with military precision. You make a friend, a shoemaker who swears he once cobbled for the Prime Minister. He can't remember which Prime Minister, but the story gets better with each refill. Of course, the real problem is the morning after. You wake up in a room that might be yours, surrounded by the detritus of bad decisions, a broken hat, an unfamiliar dog, and a note on your hand that reads "Never trust a man with 2 umbrellas." Your head feels like a construction site, your mouth like a gravel pit, and your stomach is auditioning for a role in a Greek tragedy. The Victorian solution? More gin. The hair of the dog is less a metaphor, more a way of life. You stumble back to the shop, clutching your head, and order another round. The cycle continues, unbroken, until either payday or a sudden burst of moral reform. Occasionally, you vow to stop. Sometimes you even succeed, for an hour or two. Still, there's something honest about it. Gin is the drink of the people, the poor man's philosopher, the consolation prize for surviving another day in a city that never really goes to sleep. It's liquid courage, liquid regret, and liquid proof that the Victorians were, above all, stubbornly optimistic. Or maybe just stubborn. So tonight, raise a glass to your ancestors. They survived the gin epidemic, and so, miraculously, did the human race. Sleep well, and maybe stick to tea tomorrow. Victorian pharmacies are bursting with colourful bottles promising to cure what ails you. Some contain cocaine, others contain alcohol, and some, if you're unlucky, contain mercury. You buy a bottle for your melancholy and wind up with a new rash and a cheerful attitude. Let's take a stroll down the high street, boots clacking on cobbles, purse in hand, your body riddled with aches, pains, and at least 3 kinds of mystery fatigue. Your first stop isn't the doctor, it's the chemist's shop, a Victorian wonderland of dubious science and even more dubious ethics. Shelves are lined with patent medicines in every hue, gleaming in the gaslight, labels screaming promises like invigorates the liver or restores lost manliness. You pick one up, doctor. Bicknell's invincible elixir, and wonder if it will finally cure your Sunday morning dread or just make you see through time. Shopping for medicine in Victorian Britain is less like a health intervention and more like participating in a strange lottery. No prescription needed, just a willingness to gamble with your own internal organs. Most patent medicines are a cheerful blend of sugar syrup, questionable extracts, and enough alcohol to qualify as breakfast. Some are loaded with opiates, which guarantees at least temporary relief. Others promise quick and thorough cleansing of the system, which is Victorian for stay close to a chamber pot. Reading the label is its own adventure. Ingredients are listed with the kind of optimism only a 19th century copywriter could muster. A dash of strychnine, a pinch of calomel, and just enough chloroform to keep you guessing. For all you know, botanical essence could be code for whatever the apprentice swept off the floor. The more outrageous the claim, the better it sells. Did your hair fall out? There's a tonic for that. Are you feeling blue? Try Dr. Periwinkle's Joyful Julep. It tastes like licorice and, somehow, also like despair. Every respectable household keeps a few bottles on hand. One for headaches, one for digestive trouble, one for the nerves, and a mystery bottle you inherited from your aunt that glows slightly in the dark. Children get a spoonful for coughs, women for female troubles, and men for absolutely anything that might interfere with sitting still for 5 minutes. If you're really lucky, you might find one that doesn't taste like regret, marinated in turpentine. Patent medicines are the original multi-level marketing scheme. They're advertised everywhere. Posters on every lamppost, testimonials in the penny papers, travelling salesmen who promise the moon and deliver mild hallucinations. Your favourite testimonial comes from a gentleman in Leeds who claims Dr. Wormwood's restorative cordial cured his gout, sciatica, and fear of Mondays, all in one bottle. And let's not forget the secret ingredient, hope. Even when you know, deep down, that Reverend Splendid's marvellous drops are 80% gin and 20% broken promises, you still take a swig and believe, for a few moments, that tomorrow might be slightly less Victorian than today. Of course, there are side effects. This is Victorian medicine after all. Maybe your hands tingle, your vision blurs, or you develop a rash in a location best left undescribed. You don't tell anyone. It's probably just the humours acting up. And if your patent medicine doesn't fix your problem, no worries. The chemist will happily sell you another bottle with a different label and exactly the same ingredients. By the end of the week, your bathroom shelf is a rainbow of remedies, none of which actually cure you, but all of which make life slightly more bearable. You can't help but admire the creativity of the age. Patent medicines are part miracle, part con, and part community theatre. So you take another sip, toast your reflection, and try not to think too hard about what's swirling in the glass. In Victorian Britain, sometimes the best cure is simply believing you've taken one. Sleep tight, and maybe put the glowing bottle back in the cupboard. Just in case. Pale skin is in, and nothing says ready for the ball like a touch of arsenic. You nibble on arsenic wafers to lighten your complexion, hoping to avoid the whole sudden death side effect. Looking fabulous is worth the risk, apparently. Let's get ready for the most glamorous night of your Victorian life. The invitations are sent, the orchestra is tuning up, and your arch-rival has already been seen in town, boasting a complexion only slightly less ghostly than your own. You stand at your dressing table, eyeing a tiny decorative box filled with what looks suspiciously like communion wafers, but is, in fact, a delicately lethal dose of arsenic, billed as the latest in continental beauty science. What could possibly go wrong? In Victorian Britain, pale skin isn't just fashionable. It's proof that you're wealthy enough to avoid manual labour, sunshine, and any activity that might involve sweating or smiling. Tans are for farmers, and ruddy cheeks are for children. You, however, aspire to the sort of porcelain glow that suggests you've spent the last decade haunting a candlelit library and occasionally fainting for dramatic effect. Enter arsenic, sold in charming little packets and whispered about in every boudoir. Arsenic wafers are the original beauty hack. They promise to clear the complexion, refine the skin, and impart an ethereal radiance, which is Victorian, for make you look slightly unwell in an alluring way. Doctors, ever helpful, recommend a strict regime, one wafer before breakfast, another at tea, and perhaps a third before bed, if you're feeling especially competitive. You take your first bite, half expecting to drop dead on the spot. Instead, you feel a warm glow of smugness. You are, for now, both fashionable and alive. The rest of your beauty routine follows suit. A dab of lead-based face powder, a touch of Mercury cream to keep those freckles at bay, and a hearty pinch of belladonna drops for that irresistible wide-eyed and probably hallucinating look. You sweep down the stairs, positively radiant, if a little dizzy. At the ball, you're a vision. The gaslights catch your pale cheeks, and the other guests whisper in envy. Is it genetics? Or just a well-timed fever, they wonder. Only you know the truth. Beauty, in Victorian England, is a competitive contact sport, and you're playing to win. It helps that arsenic has a second, secret benefit. It curbs your appetite. No one's sure if this is a desirable side effect or a sign to call the doctor, but in an era of tight corsets and endless etiquette, skipping supper is almost a relief. Let's be honest. Nobody talks about the risks. Sure, there are rumours, occasional fainting spells, tingling fingertips, the odd sudden collapse during a waltz. Some claim that the local undertaker can spot an arsenic enthusiast by the telltale greenish hue that eventually creeps into the complexion. But these are the same people who warn against going outside without gloves or reading French novels, so you take it with a grain of salt, or maybe just another wafer. Still, there are limits. You have a friend, Mabel, who took her beauty regimen a little too far and now spends most afternoons resting her eyes in a darkened room. The family blames the vapours, but everyone suspects it's the cosmetics. You vow to be more careful, at least until next season's beauty trend comes along, something safer perhaps, like electroshock facials or raw egg masks. Back home at the end of the night, you remove your gloves and admire your nearly luminescent reflection. The evening was a triumph, and you survived. Glamorous, slightly toxic, and very much on trend. The real secret of Victorian beauty? Endurance, denial, and a dash of good luck. Sleep well, glowing one. And if you dream of mysterious powders and envy-inducing paleness, remember, in the Victorian era, beauty is fleeting, but arsenic is forever. Artists and poets flock to dimly lit bars, pouring themselves tall glasses of glowing green absinthe. You swirl in the sugar cube, stare into space, and wait for the hallucinations, inspiration, or both. Who needs sleep when you've got dreams in a bottle? It's late evening in Victorian London, or maybe Paris, because everything is a little foggier, stranger, and more dramatic tonight. You slide onto a creaky bar stool at a table already crowded with poets, painters, and people who claim to have invented new forms of punctuation. The lighting is soft, the conversation is profound, or at least slurred, and the bartender's moustache is so well groomed it could probably win a prize. Everyone here is looking for the same thing, a glimpse of the green fairy, that legendary muse said to visit anyone brave enough to finish a second glass. The ritual is half the fun. The bartender sets a glass before you, full of bright emerald absinthe, lurid, otherworldly, like it's been bottled from the northern lights. He balances a slotted spoon on the rim, places a rough cube of sugar atop it, and pours a slow trickle of ice-cold water over everything. The liquid clouds, swirling into an opalescent mist. The poets at your table sigh appreciatively, as if the transformation is proof that beauty can be distilled, sweetened, and slightly alcoholic. You take your first sip and brace for the magic. Absinthe tastes like licorice, herbs, and the kind of forest you suspect might be haunted. There's a sharp, medicinal bite, followed by a strange warmth, a feeling like your soul has loosened its collar. The green fairy works quickly. Maybe you're inspired to write a tragic sonnet, or perhaps you simply become very interested in the patterns on your napkin. Around you, conversation drifts between wild inspiration and even wilder delusion. The artist beside you sketches frantically on a napkin, convinced he's capturing the very essence of time. The poet on your left is arguing with an empty chair about the meaning of existence. Someone in the corner begins to recite Ode to a Greengrocer for the 4th time this week. The bartender barely blinks. He's seen it all before. Absinthe has a reputation, and the Victorians love a good scandal. It's rumoured to unlock creativity, dissolve the boundaries between the ordinary and the sublime, and, with enough glasses, encourage you to paint your own shoes. Medical authorities warn of hallucinations, madness, and sudden urges to wear velvet capes. Some even claim the green fairy will whisper secrets in your ear, secrets that make sense until you sober up. It's not all wild visions and poetic rapture. For many, absinthe is simply a cheaper, stronger way to dull the misery of another long night in a city that rarely sleeps. The streets outside are cold, the boarding house is colder, and your prospects are as thin as your last crust of bread. At least in here, with the absinthe glass glowing softly, you feel connected to something larger than yourself. A grand tradition of questionable decisions made by people with excellent hair. Eventually, the line between inspiration and inebriation blurs. Maybe you see a flash of green out of the corner of your eye, or maybe you just forgot to blink. The world feels a little less heavy, the shadows a little softer. Who cares if your muse is a hallucination? At least she's on time. When closing time rolls around, you stumble out onto the cobblestones, head full of poetry and shoes that may or may not belong to you. The air is cool, the night is full of possibilities, and the green fairy, elusive as ever, lingers just out of sight. Absinthe, because sometimes the best ideas come from the strangest places, and sometimes it's just nice to believe in a little magic, even if it's bottled. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as vivid as a Victorian's after 3 glasses. Your local pharmacist recommends a little cannabis for cramps, coughs, or creative blocks. It's considered highly respectable, as long as you don't mention it at church. You take a spoonful, and suddenly your aunt's stories are much more interesting. Let's step inside a fashionable Victorian sitting room. The wallpaper is floral, the clock is ticking, and you're seated in a creaky armchair, bracing yourself for another evening of family conversation. Aunt Prudence is waxing poetic about her trip to the seaside in 1862 again. You've tried tea, you've tried polite coughing, you've even tried staring meaningfully at the window, as if expecting a passing parade. Nothing works. But then, you remember, tucked away in your waistcoat pocket is a tiny bottle from the chemist. The label reads, "Cannabis indica tincture. For all that ails thee." This is not some shadowy street transaction. No, this is the height of medical sophistication. Victorian doctors prescribe cannabis tincture for everything from the nerves to gout, from muscle spasms to that most mysterious of ailments, female hysteria. It's a cure-all sold right beside the arsenic wafers and laudanum, with endorsements from doctors who have never actually tried it, but who enjoy the sound of the word tincture. The instructions are simple. 1 spoonful, neat or in tea. Repeat as needed until you feel either relief or an overwhelming desire to listen to your uncle's entire coin collection story without interruption. The taste is earthy, herbal, with a trace of something spicy, like if you brewed a pot of chamomile in the back garden and then forgot about it for a week. The effects are subtle at first. Your shoulders unclench. The piano music from the next room suddenly sounds almost pleasant. You find yourself genuinely fascinated by Aunt Prudence's story about the world's slowest donkey and her fight with a lobster in Brighton. The family dog looks up at you with approval. Even the wallpaper seems a bit less judgmental. Cannabis tincture is a favourite among the upper classes. It's discreet, sophisticated, and according to Mrs. Abernathy down the lane, positively life-changing for creative endeavours. Poets swear by it. Painters claim it unlocks new realms of colour. Your cousin Harold, who's been working on the same novel for 6 years, credits it for every page he's managed to complete, all 9 of them. It's not about getting high. That word won't become trendy until the 20th century. No, you're simply elevating your constitution, or soothing the humours. And if anyone asks why you're giggling at your own reflection in the spoon, you blame the draft. The best part? No social stigma, as long as you keep things subtle. It's not uncommon to see a lady reach for her tincture bottle after a difficult game of whist, or a gentleman take a dash before attempting a new moustache style. Even Queen Victoria's own physician writes enthusiastically about its benefits for menstrual cramps, which is Victorian code for "let's never speak of this again." Of course, there are limits. Too much tincture, and you may find yourself rearranging the antimacassars for an hour, convinced that symmetry is the secret to true happiness. You might wander into the garden and forget why you went there, only to return with a daisy chain and a renewed sense of peace about Aunt Prudence's stories. The family cat becomes an object of endless philosophical fascination. Was she always this wise? Should you ask her about the meaning of life? As the evening winds down, you realize you've survived family hour with your sanity intact, and maybe even enjoyed it. The shadows are softer, the laughter more genuine, and you feel, for once, at home in your own skin. You slip the tincture bottle back into your pocket, grateful for this little taste of Victorian wellness. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, sometimes the most respectable tonic is the one that lets you finally enjoy the little things. Like a quiet house, a boring story, or the purr of a philosophical cat. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as soothing as the finest cannabis tincture shared over a cup of tea and a wink from the green fairy herself. Recommended for everything from nervous exhaustion to muscle cramps, Strychnine is basically Victorian Red Bull, with just a pinch of fatality. One sip too many, and your bad day turns into a full-on death scene, but at least you're awake. Let's set the mood. It's late afternoon, and you're suffering from what the Victorians call the vapours, a fancy way of saying you're tired, your nerves are frayed, and you suspect your blood is several degrees out of balance. Your friend's advice? March down to the chemist and ask for the most electrifying tonic on the shelf. The pharmacist, with a cheerful disregard for mortality, presents you with a stylish green bottle labelled Strychnine Elixir, invigorate body, mind and spirit. Next to it is a skull and crossbones, but that's mostly for decoration. Strychnine, for the uninitiated, is derived from the seeds of the Nux vomica tree, a name that sounds like a Harry Potter spell and is about as safe as one too. In small doses, the Victorians swear it's invigorating. Doctors tout it as a stimulant for the heart, a cure for fatigue, and a magical solution for anything that might require a little extra pep. Got a case of the Mondays? Strychnine. Trouble finishing your weekly letter to mother? Strychnine. A looming feeling that you're starring in a Dickens novel and the author hates you personally? Strychnine. The recommended dose is, of course, just a drop. You mix it with water, or maybe wine if you're feeling adventurous, and raise a glass to Victorian ingenuity. The taste is bitter, metallic, and ever so slightly alarming. You immediately feel your pulse quicken and your eyelids snap open. Congratulations, you are now functioning at the Victorian equivalent of turbo mode. The city's smog seems a little less grey, your neighbour's violin practice a bit more tolerable. You might even try writing poetry or walking briskly around the park, though perhaps not at the same time. Victorian athletes love strychnine. Before the Olympics became a festival of Gatorade and sponsorships, marathon runners would take strychnine tonics mid-race, convinced it would keep them upright through the final, painful miles. Performance enhancing doesn't even begin to cover it. It's not uncommon to see a determined young man collapse spectacularly at the finish line, twitching with energy and a clear sense that he's given it his all. The doctor's solution? More strychnine, sometimes with a splash of brandy for good measure. Strychnine's reputation, however, is a double-edged sword. While it's celebrated in advertisements, brightens the eyes, lifts the spirit, revives the corpse. It's also a favourite plot device in every Victorian mystery novel. A drop in the wrong teacup and suddenly you're not invigorated. You're starring in the most dramatic dinner party exit of the year. No upper-class family gathering is complete without a whispered rumour about someone's second cousin being done in by strychnine just because he criticised the blancmange. Of course, nobody dwells on the risk. In an age where most medicines have more side effects than benefits, strychnine just fits right in. You accept that a little danger makes life interesting. Your friends compare dosages at tea, boasting about their fortitude and how they only had to lie down twice last week. Besides, if you feel the tiniest hint of a cramp, you're encouraged to chase it with a dose of laudanum, because nothing says health like mixing your poisons and hoping for the best. In the end, you survive the day. Your muscles feel oddly limber, your heart is racing, and your sense of adventure is at an all-time high. The world seems sharper, brighter, and, if you don't think about it too hard, almost safe. So you tuck the bottle away, vowing to only use it for emergencies, like Mondays, mother-in-law visits, or surprise audits. In Victorian Britain, strychnine is a tonic, a thrill, and an ongoing murder mystery. Just another day at the chemist. Sleep tight, and maybe check your teacup in the morning. Invented as a non-addictive substitute for morphine, heroin is prescribed for coughs and colds. You take a spoonful, notice your lungs stop hurting, and also that you don't care about anything else anymore. Productivity drops, but so does your anxiety. It's a brisk morning in Victorian Britain, and you're waking up to the familiar sound of your neighbour hacking away like a tuberculosis-themed metronome. The air in your bedroom is thick with coal dust and hope, but your chest feels tighter than your corset after Sunday roast. You're coughing, wheezing, and just a little tired of all the remedies that taste like boiled disappointment. But then, as if by magic, the pharmacist down the street offers you the latest wonder drug, heroin. Completely safe, they say. Non-addictive, they promise. Plus, it's German engineering. What could possibly go wrong? You open the elegant glass bottle, and the label says it all, for persistent cough, nerves, mild pain, and general malaise. The directions are reassuringly vague. Just one spoonful, and suddenly you feel like you're floating. Your chest relaxes, your cough vanishes, and so does your concern about pretty much everything else. That overdue rent, the looming threat of a visit from your mother-in-law, and even the neighbour's accordion practice, all fade into gentle irrelevance. Is it the miracle of modern medicine, or just a tiny vacation from caring? Either way, you're not complaining. Doctors love heroin. It's the new kid on the block, outshining even laudanum and morphine. Unlike its bitter, occasionally problematic cousin morphine, heroin arrives with a glowing reputation for being gentler, safer, and practically without side effects. In fact, pharmaceutical adverts tout it as the ideal remedy for delicate throats and frazzled nerves. Queen Victoria's own physician might even approve, though you doubt the Queen herself would be caught dead with a sticky bottle tucked in her reticule. It's not just for coughs either. Victorian society quickly finds creative uses for this magical elixir. Got a headache? Heroin. Suffering from anxiety? Heroin. Need to unwind after a particularly harrowing afternoon of needlepoint? Heroin. Mothers keep it in the medicine cabinet. Fathers carry it in their waistcoat. And even your local vicar might slip you a bottle for medicinal purposes only. It becomes the panacea for a world full of irritating symptoms and inconvenient emotions. Of course, the first thing you notice after your spoonful, other than your new and remarkable apathy, is the warm, comforting numbness. Productivity dips. Your to-do list starts to look less like a threat and more like a suggestion. You'll get around to dusting the sitting room eventually. Maybe. Or perhaps you'll just sit by the fire and stare at the wallpaper, which, now that you really look at it, has a pleasingly hypnotic pattern. The entire world slows down. Your breathing is easy, and even the neighbour's endless monologue about his coin collection becomes strangely fascinating. You are, in every sense, chilling. Heroin isn't just a solo activity. Pharmaceutical companies rush to market every form imaginable. Lozenges, syrups, cough drops, even heroin. Laced throat pastilles for children. Advertisements feature angelic children, robust mustachioed gentlemen, and mothers with perfect hair, all smiling dreamily into the distance. Nobody mentions dependence, but everyone mentions how rested and calm they feel. Inevitably, the cracks begin to show. Friends forget to return borrowed umbrellas. Neighbours are caught napping at inconvenient times. There's an uptick in people sitting motionless on park benches, gazing at pigeons with what can only be described as philosophical detachment. But as long as the cough is gone, who really cares? The city breathes a little easier, even if its population is doing less breathing overall. As the day ends, you tuck your bottle of heroin back into the medicine chest, right next to the arsenic wafers and the laudanum tincture. Another medical marvel, another quiet evening, another round of let's not mention this to the doctor. Sleep deeply, knowing that, for tonight at least, history has given you the gift of peaceful lungs and even more peaceful indifference. A sore throat is no excuse to suffer. Victorian cough drops are delicious, effective, and contain enough opium to put a buffalo to sleep. You pop one in your mouth, and suddenly your entire afternoon melts into a warm puddle of contentment. It's cold and damp outside as always. You're bundled in 3 layers of wool, yet your throat still feels like you swallowed a handful of sandpaper and washed it down with Victorian river water. Your nose is running, your head is pounding, and your mood is somewhere between slightly irritable and ready to punch the next person who mentions the weather. But wait, there's hope on the horizon. You rummage through your coat pocket and retrieve a little tin labelled Dr. Fothergill's Soothing Cough Drops. Guaranteed relief, pleasant taste, and absolutely no unpleasant surprises. You slide a candy into your mouth and immediately feel a sweet floral burst, part honey, part anise, and part something mysterious that tingles all the way down your throat. The secret, of course, is opium. These aren't your modern sugar-free menthol lozenges. Victorian cough drops are pharmaceutical-grade chill pills, wrapped in a sugar shell and designed to take the edge off life, one soothing, slightly stupefying dose at a time. Children love them. Why wouldn't they? Victorian sweets are generally made of boiled disappointment and dreams, so an opium-laced cough drop is basically a golden ticket to Naptown. Schoolmasters notice an entire classroom goes suspiciously quiet after recess. Parents congratulate themselves on their cleverness, as siblings who were once at each other's throats now sit serenely, gazing at dust motes, as if they're pondering the nature of the universe. If you're a child, you don't question it. You just savor the sweet haze and wonder why math suddenly seems less urgent. Adults are no less devoted. Your mother keeps a stash for special occasions, meaning any occasion when someone under the roof is coughing, sneezing, or, let's be honest, speaking out of turn. Fathers slip one before braving the morning commute, or a lecture on fiscal responsibility from their boss. The local vicar is rumoured to have a tin hidden in his pulpit, ensuring the Sunday sermon is delivered in a tone both measured and blissfully unhurried. Even the advertisements are charmingly shameless. Posters boast, "Safe for all ages," and "No more tears at bedtime," with illustrations of beaming, glassy-eyed children holding hands around the family piano. No one seems concerned that their temporary relief might become a lifelong habit. In the Victorian era, side effects are a problem for future generations, or, preferably, for someone else entirely. Let's not overlook the real magic. These cough drops actually work. The tickle in your throat vanishes, the headache fades. The existential dread that comes from realizing you have to cross 3 muddy streets and a suspicious puddle just to buy a cabbage, gone. Life's edges blur. Your boss's droning voice becomes soft background music. The entire city feels warmer, cozier, just a little bit dreamlike. Of course, moderation is key, a lesson the Victorians rarely heed. Take a few too many, and you might find yourself nodding off at your desk, or staring at a street lamp for half an hour, convinced it's trying to tell you something profound. There are whispers, too, of children who've enjoyed the relief of opium-infused drops a bit too enthusiastically and slept through Christmas. But as with most Victorian problems, these are best left to the family doctor's discretion and a strongly worded letter to the manufacturer. Still, it's hard to argue with results. In a world where every cough could be a sign of something dreadful, and every winter brings a new round of illnesses, a soothing, numbing cough drop is the closest thing most Victorians get to comfort. You slip another into your mouth, savour the gentle calm, and let yourself drift through the rest of the afternoon, undisturbed and utterly content. Sleep well, and remember, in Victorian Britain, even a sore throat is an opportunity to bliss out. Just maybe don't share with the dog. If you're feeling sluggish, achy, or alive, someone will hand you a tonic. Brandy for breakfast, port for lunch, whiskey at bedtime. It's all medicinal, your doctor insists, and who are you to argue with science? Let's imagine your day begins not with a cup of tea, but with a generous pour of restorative brandy. The sun hasn't even crept over the sooty rooftops, but the household is already bustling, and you need something to take the edge off your recurring existential dread and the neighbour's pet rooster who believes in aggressive dawn announcements. To Victorian answer? A splash of something amber and warming, strictly for your health, of course. Your doctor is fully on board. In fact, he's the one who prescribed it, a small glass upon waking to stimulate the digestion and steady the nerves. He recommends port wine for lunch, fortifies the constitution, madam, and a finger of whiskey in the evening to encourage restful sleep and keep out the fog. If you're especially lucky, you might even get a prescription for champagne, which is believed to be excellent for nervous disorders and for celebrating the fact that you're not a chimney sweep. It's not just you, the whole family gets in on the act. Children are given hot toddies for colds, just a drop of sherry, dear, to soothe the throat, and the elderly sip cordials for their joints. It keeps me spry, or at least upright. Aunt Beatrice, whose only medical condition seems to be a fondness for gossip, swears by her luncheon claret, and Grandpa claims that his daily rum ration is the sole reason he's outlived 3 doctors and a particularly persistent goat. Victorian medicine has an explanation for everything, and the answer is almost always alcohol. Feeling tired? You need a tonic. In your knees? Try some fortified wine. The vapors? Brandy. An attack of the nerves? A swift glass of port, followed by a brisk walk, and possibly another glass of port if the walk was too brisk. If the doctor doesn't know what's wrong with you, which is most of the time, he'll recommend a stimulating cordial poured generously with a look that says, "Let's not overthink this." Pharmacies are stocked with bottles of every size and description, their labels promising relief from gout, rheumatism, melancholy, and the modern malaise of simply being alive in the 19th century. Dr. Grimsby's vitalizing tonic rejuvenates, revives, and restores. Ingredients: herbs, spices, and, buried in fine print, a heroic quantity of gin. Every social event is lubricated with medicinal drinks. Sherry at funerals, brandy at weddings, and punch at everything in between. And of course there are side effects, not that anyone mentions them. You might feel slightly dizzy, inappropriately chatty, or develop a sudden urge to lecture strangers about the healing powers of Madeira. The world becomes softer, kinder, and your aches, worries, and memories of last week's bill from the coalman fade into a pleasant haze. If you overdo it, you can always blame the tonic. Doctor's orders, you mumble, as you attempt to climb the stairs and instead invent a new, sideways method of locomotion. There's an unspoken social contract. Nobody judges, because everyone is in the same tipsy boat. Even the Queen's household is rumoured to have a cellar full of health elixirs, and the Prime Minister is rarely seen without a discreet flask, for diplomatic purposes. The line between celebration and treatment is not so much blurred as enthusiastically erased. So as you settle into your armchair, glass in hand, remember that in Victorian Britain, wellness isn't about kale or cold showers. It's about finding the right bottle, pouring a generous dose, and trusting that whatever ails you can be treated with a good cheer and just a touch of alcohol. Sleep well, fortified and glowing, your doctor would be proud. Mercury is the go-to fix for everything from constipation to melancholy. You swallow a tiny, shiny pill and hope for the best. Symptoms include relief, nausea, and the slow realization that you might be glowing for the wrong reasons. Let's set the scene. It's a typically grey Victorian morning. The air smells like coal dust and boiled cabbage, and your mood matches the wallpaper, slightly peeling and possibly mouldy. You wake up feeling out of sorts, which is the Victorian way of saying your insides are waging a small civil war, but there's no need to worry. Tucked away in your medicine cabinet, right next to the arsenic wafers and that bottle of brandy for medicinal purposes, sits a little tin of mercury pills, promising hope, regularity, and possibly an early introduction to the afterlife. Mercury, yes, that mercury. The same shimmering, silvery liquid you were absolutely forbidden to touch in science class. In Victorian Britain, it's been rebranded as a miracle cure. Got a headache? Mercury. Achy joints? Mercury. Suffering from the blues, the runs, or just an inconvenient bout of existential dread? You guessed it. Mercury. Doctors hand it out like sweets, confident in the knowledge that if you're not feeling better soon, at least you'll be feeling something very memorable. The pills themselves are impressive. Tiny, shiny, perfectly round, and just heavy enough to remind you they're probably not good for you. You pop one and wash it down with a generous gulp of gin, strictly for medicinal purposes. The taste is metallic, with just a hint of regret. Within moments you feel a strange mix of sensations. Relief, yes, but also an odd buzzing in your ears, a subtle tingling in your fingertips, and the creeping suspicion that you might start glowing in the dark if you take another. Mercury isn't just a home remedy, it's a staple of Victorian medicine, beloved by doctors for its ability to stimulate the system and, if you're lucky, not kill you outright. It's prescribed for constipation, but also for syphilis, the flu, nervous disorders, and any condition that can be described as stubborn. If your problem doesn't go away after a few mercury pills, your doctor shrugs and suggests you take more. After all, if the first dose didn't fix it, perhaps you just need to really commit. Side effects? They're legendary. There's the sweating, the trembling, the mysterious rashes, the tendency to occasionally lose track of your own name. Victorians call it salivation, which sounds polite until you realize it means you're drooling like a teething toddler on a sugar rush. There's also mercurial erethism, or as it's known to your friends, becoming weirdly emotional about turnips. But hey, at least you're not constipated anymore. The social etiquette around mercury is simple. Everyone pretends it's normal. You compare notes at tea. How are your symptoms? Well, I'm still glowing, but my gout is gone. Mrs. Pennington down the lane insists her complexion has never looked better, though she's been seen muttering at the gas lamps and reorganizing her spoons alphabetically. Children are given mercury for worm infections. Adults take it for headaches. Grandparents keep it on hand for melancholy, which, in their case, is code for still living with the grandchildren. Advertisements are shameless. Brighten your day with Dr. Mercurio's marvelous pills. Cheerful disposition or your money back. The fact that the local undertaker is a loyal customer goes unmentioned. Even the Queen's own physicians have been known to recommend a mercury tonic. Just don't ask what happened to their earlier patients. As evening falls and the symptoms subside or escalate, you reflect on your day. You feel lighter, brighter, and ever so slightly radioactive. You survived another Victorian cure, and for now, that's enough. So, as you drift off, try not to worry about the side effects. In Victorian Britain, the line between remedy and risk is charmingly thin. Sleep tight, and may your dreams be mercury-free, or at least entertainingly shiny. You need a pick-me-up. Maybe it's a pinch of powdered tobacco. Maybe it's a hand-rolled cigarette. Maybe it's an ornate pipe. The point is, everyone's lungs are under attack, and nobody cares. You cough daintily and keep going. Let's take a stroll down a bustling Victorian street. Every lamplighter, banker, street urchin, and disgruntled poet is puffing away at something. It's not just the coal smoke turning the sky an odd shade of beige. It's also a collective fog of tobacco, courtesy of every man, woman, and increasingly precocious child. The air is less fresh and more nicely seasoned, a blend of Virginia leaf, curiosity, and the vague scent of rebellion. Smoking is less a vice and more a communal activity. There's an art to it. At a dinner party, gentlemen retreat to the smoking room to tell stories, smoke their meerschaum pipes, and compare the merits of Turkish versus Latakia tobacco. You, as an aspiring sophisticate, Produce your own engraved snuff box, a badge of taste and subtle disregard for nasal comfort. With a flourish you've practiced in the mirror, you offer your neighbour a pinch of snuff, and together you lean back, eyes watering, as a sneeze of biblical proportions overtakes you both. It's not a flaw, it's tradition. If you're not a snuff person, perhaps you favour cigarettes, hand-rolled, loosely packed, and delivered with the air of someone who might, at any moment, recite poetry. Cigarette smoking is all the rage among artists, intellectuals, and anyone who likes to pretend they're more French than they really are. You flick your ash into the fireplace and ponder life's great mysteries, like how the Victorians survived with no knowledge of lung cancer or air filtration. Pipes are for the patient. There's ritual in the packing, the lighting, the tamping, an entire hobby built around turning a few leaves into an hour of fragrant self-reflection. The scent drifts through the house, mingling with furniture polish and the faint odour of boiled onions. It's cosy, if you ignore the fact that the curtains have slowly turned from cream to yellow over the course of a year. Snuff, meanwhile, is the espresso shot of Victorian tobacco use. It's quick, portable, and leaves you with a faint tingle in your sinuses that says, "Congratulations, you're definitely awake now." The snuff box is a conversation starter, passed discreetly under the table at dinner parties and public lectures. Some claim snuff is good for clearing the mind, though more often it just leads to a round of synchronized sneezing and polite applause. Nobody worries much about health. Consumption is rampant, but it's usually blamed on drafts, bad humours, or a lack of robust Victorian morals. If your cough persists, you might switch to a milder blend, or just add a tot of whiskey and hope for the best. Even the advertisements are blissfully unconcerned, mild for the throat, stimulating for the mind. Recommended by generals, bishops, and 2 out of 3 street magicians. Women are catching on too, though smoking in public is still scandalous. You might sneak a cheroot behind the greenhouse, or take a secret puff at a literary salon. Nothing says modern woman quite like accidentally setting your bonnet ribbons on fire with a careless match. And so, you cough, you sneeze, you carry on. Victorian society keeps moving, powered by nicotine optimism and an absolute refusal to acknowledge any downside. By evening, you're ready to retire to your favourite armchair, pipe in hand, confident that you've participated fully in the grand, smoky ritual of your era. Sleep well, lungs bravely wheezing, as the smoke curls upward and your worries drift away. In Victorian Britain, everyone inhales, just not always common sense. Anxious? Overstimulated? Your physician recommends a bromide cocktail, soothing, numbing, and available at any pharmacy. You take 1 dose and forget what you were worried about, or possibly your own name. It's the end of another overstimulating Victorian day. Factory whistles, horse-drawn chaos in the street, a morning of being scolded by your boss, and a rousing game of find the damp spot in the parlor wallpaper. Your nerves are, as the Victorians say, quite undone. Modern readers might reach for chamomile tea or a streaming service, but you, proud child of the 19th century, go straight for the blue glass bottle marked bromide mixture, for agitation and restlessness. Bromide is the era's answer to everything from anxiety and sleeplessness to mild existential horror. The pharmacist cheerfully recommends it for ladies of a nervous temperament, overwrought clerks, and anyone whose life includes children, coal deliveries, or the neighbour's terrible violin practice. The instructions are vague, but reassuring. 1 tablespoon in water. Repeat as needed. Stop if you begin to dream in black and white. You pour yourself a generous spoonful and swirl it into a glass, watching as the mixture clouds slightly, like a storm brewing in a teacup. The taste is bland, faintly salty, and not entirely unlike licking a porcelain plate. Still, you swallow bravely, imagining yourself on the road to tranquility. Within minutes, a wave of calm washes over you. That persistent worry about your finances, your future, or what's currently living behind the coal scuttle slips quietly away. The room grows softer, voices are muffled, and your aunt's retelling of her engagement story for the 5th time this week seems almost tolerable. You stare into space and realize you haven't blinked for a full minute, but that's probably fine. Bromide works slowly, gently smoothing out the rough edges of Victorian existence until the world feels manageable, or at least ignorable. Doctors love bromides for their sheer versatility. Is your teenager moody? Bromide. Is your husband too enthusiastic about lawn care? Bromide. Is your cook nervous about the new oven? Double bromide. The bottles multiply in medicine cabinets across the country, lined up next to patent liver tonics and bottles of Dr. Sleepy's indispensable morphine syrup. Medical journals call bromide mixtures a boon to the agitated, though they quietly admit that side effects may include chronic indifference and forgetting one's address. Socially, bromides become the go-to fix for any occasion. You arrive at a dinner party, anxious about your conversational skills, and slip a dose into your sherry. By dessert, you're so relaxed you accidentally compliment the wallpaper for its soothing pattern, not realizing you're actually talking to the family dog. Your friends assure you this is all very normal and discreetly compare dosage notes while pretending to discuss the weather. Too much bromide, however, and the world gets a little too peaceful. You might find yourself staring out the window for hours, pondering the mysteries of the universe, like why your neighbor owns so many hats or what the cat is really thinking. The only real risk is that you'll become so serene that the idea of folding laundry or paying bills seems not only impossible, but unnecessary. Victorian advertisements promise a life of tranquility. For the busy mother, the weary clerk, and the nervous vicar. The fact that nobody remembers what happened last Tuesday is apparently part of the charm. Some ambitious souls experiment with mixing bromide and other tonics, laudanum, gin, or whatever's on hand, creating a cocktail that could tranquilize a small bear. So as evening settles, you pour one last dose, feeling your nerves, and possibly your thoughts, dissolve into blissful nothingness. The world is quiet, your worries are distant, and sleep comes on gentle, padded feet. Rest easy, your nerves, like most things in Victorian Britain, are better off slightly numb. You've got work to do, lots of work. Why not sip a glass of Vin Mariani, the cocaine-infused wine adored by popes and presidents alike? One glass, and you're ready to conquer your inbox or, build a railway. It's the height of the Victorian age, and everyone has somewhere to be. Your to-do list is longer than the Thames, and you've only just finished dusting the mantelpiece when you remember you also need to invent the light bulb, write 3 letters, and solve the coal shortage. You sigh, pour yourself a modest glass of wine, except this is no ordinary table vintage. This is the legendary Vin Mariani, a robust Bordeaux enlivened with a healthy infusion of South American coca leaves, the same ones that fuel energetic llamas and, apparently, late-stage capitalism. The effect is immediate and profound. Within minutes, you're energized, optimistic, and utterly convinced you could run a small empire, or at least alphabetize every spice in the larder. The wine itself tastes rich, fruity, and only slightly suspicious. Your hands tingle, your mind buzzes, and you find yourself not only conquering your chores but doing them twice, just to be sure. Who knew dusting could be this exhilarating? It's not just you. Vin Mariani is a global sensation beloved by artists, authors, and anyone with an overwhelming number of obligations. The advertisements are shameless. Popes, presidents, and prime ministers all pictured lifting a glass, smiling serenely as if they've just remembered the meaning of life, or at least how to organize their sock drawers. Thomas Edison swears by it, claiming it helps him invent better and faster. You begin to suspect that half of the Victorian era's progress is really just a side effect of the world's most enthusiastic happy hour. Doctors love cocaine wine too. They prescribe it for anemia, neurasthenia, female fatigue, and a catch-all diagnosis known as overwork, which in Victorian England simply means being alive. Your own physician recommends a glass before breakfast to stimulate the constitution, and perhaps another at lunch, just to keep your productivity soaring. No one mentions the crash that comes later, or the slightly twitchy feeling in your left eyebrow. It's not just about work either. Social gatherings are transformed. The local book club is suddenly debating 4 novels at once. The parish council is organising charity balls, rebuilding the church steeple, and founding a new orphanage, all in the same afternoon. Your cousin Margaret finishes her wedding quilt in record time, then starts a second one for no reason. The family dog learns to fetch the morning paper, sort the mail, and probably run for local office, given another glass or 2. Side effects? Let's just say moderation is not the Victorian strong suit. After a few days on the Mariani method, your sleep is a fond memory, your heart flutters in time with the telegraph, and you're seriously considering running a marathon, even though you haven't owned proper shoes in years. The come down is less a gentle landing and more a spectacular nosedive into exhaustion. You lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling and wondering why you've alphabetized the coal scuttle and written a treatise on umbrella etiquette. But when you're in the zone, nothing feels impossible. Your house is spotless, your ledger balanced, your garden weeded, your novel nearly finished. You've never felt so productive, or so cheerfully oblivious to the risk that your teeth might soon be grinding in Morse code. Eventually, even the most enthusiastic Victorian has to put down the glass. You wipe the sweat from your brow, survey your many accomplishments, and resolve, maybe, to stick to ordinary claret tomorrow. So, as you settle in for the night, remember, in Victorian Britain, greatness sometimes comes from the most unlikely bottle. Sleep well, and dream of a world where every inbox is empty and every pope is just a little bit tipsy. Dentists love it, surgeons adore it. And if you're unlucky enough to faint in public, you might wake up to the gentle scent of chloroform on a hanky. Victorians use it for pain, sleep, and the occasional impromptu kidnapping. Let's set the scene. It's another bustling day in Victorian Britain and you're minding your own business when a toothache strikes with all the subtlety of a steam train. In a world without Novocaine, you head to the dentist, though dentist here means a man with steady hands, questionable hygiene, and a surprisingly upbeat attitude. The solution? Chloroform, the latest miracle in pain relief, and, if you're not careful, mild existential out-of-body experiences. The ritual is simple. You're asked to recline in the world's lumpiest chair while the dentist produces a crisp white handkerchief and a small brown bottle. He pours a few drops of clear liquid, gives you a look of grim encouragement, and presses the cloth over your nose and mouth. You inhale, feeling a cool, sweetish numbness drift up from your toes to your scalp. The world blurs, sounds grow distant, and suddenly, you're dreaming about winning the derby on a horse made entirely of marshmallows. Surgery, too, is transformed. Where once the operating theatre was a place of howling, writhing, and general Victorian melodrama, now it's oddly peaceful. Surgeons adore chloroform. It turns their patients from shrieking banshees into compliant lumps, free to be poked, prodded, and improved upon without the inconvenience of struggling or legal complaints. The medical journals fill with breathless reports. Appendix removed, no screaming. Leg amputated. Patient dreamed of Paris. Even the most anxious patient, which, let's be honest, is everyone, can now look forward to surgery with something like calm, or at least mild curiosity. Chloroform soon escapes the operating room and finds its way into daily life. Feeling restless at night, one whiff, and you're off to dreamland. Your mother-in-law visiting for the week? A little dab on her pillow might encourage tranquility. You didn't hear it from me. Victorians begin to treat chloroform like a miracle cure for life's general inconveniences. Noisy children, overlong sermons, and that annoying friend who always wants to discuss philosophy at dinner. There are even rumours of society parties where the entertainment involves passing a chloroform-dampened scarf around the room and seeing who can stay awake the longest. Of course, there are downsides. For one, dosing is an art, not a science. Too little, and you're wide awake with a damp face. Too much, and you might not wake up for the rest of the century. Some people get so enthusiastic that they wake up in a completely different city. usually missing a shoe and with no memory of the previous 48 hours. But in true Victorian style, these are seen less as risks and more as excellent stories for the next family dinner. And then there are the kidnappings, the stuff of penny dreadfuls and urban legend. If you faint on a crowded street, there's a small but non-zero chance that a mysterious stranger will produce a chloroform-soaked rag and spirit you away, Victorian damsel in distress style. More often, though, it's just the local doctor making sure you don't wake up before he's finished removing your tonsils, appendix, or, if you're unlucky, your dignity. Despite it all, chloroform remains the darling of the Victorian medicine cabinet. It is, at heart, a shortcut to oblivion, blissful, dreamless, and, if all goes well, mercifully brief. The pain is gone, the noise fades, and for a little while, life's sharpest edges are rounded off. So as you settle in for the night, be grateful for modern anesthetics, and maybe sleep with one eye open, just in case anyone comes near you with a suspiciously floral handkerchief. Sleep well, and may your dreams be blissfully free of Victorian dentistry, surgery, and accidental adventures in chloroform. Sometimes, you don't want another potion, you just want to sweat it all out. Enter the Turkish bath, steaming, packed and rumoured to be full of creative remedies floating in the vapour. You stagger out feeling like a poached Victorian egg. It's late in the week, your nerves are frayed, your skin is grey from a hearty blend of London fog and existential dread, and even your favourite tonic has started to taste suspiciously like floor polish. This, the Victorians decide, is not a job for pills or potions. No, this is a job for steam, lots of it. You gather your courage, a small towel, and whatever modesty you have left, and set off for the nearest Turkish bathhouse, ready to face your troubles with nothing but sweat and an awkwardly small bar of soap. The bathhouse itself is a labyrinth of tile, echoing with the sound of dripping water, quiet conversation, and the occasional philosophical sigh. Cloaks are handed over, clothes are shed, and you're left in what feels like the world's least flattering robe. Inside, clouds of vapour swirl, thick enough to hide the questionable design choices and the other bathers, all melting slowly into the benches like leftover wax figures. The air is scented with eucalyptus, sandalwood, and the faint whiff of last Tuesday's aftershave. A burly attendant, half philosopher, half drill sergeant, shows you to a bench and recommends, with the gravitas of a man who's seen things, that you relax and let the steam do its work. You nod, hoping your glasses don't fog up more than your sense of dignity. Someone hands you a cup of water infused with lemon, mint, or possibly something a little stronger. Is this the remedy everyone whispers about? No one knows. And frankly, after 10 minutes in the steam, you're in no condition to care. Victorian society, usually so buttoned up and proper, is oddly democratic inside the Turkish bath. Nobles and clerks alike are reduced to beet red faces, towel turbans, and a shared determination to outlast the heat. Conversations drift from politics to health, to the various merits of sweating out one's misfortunes versus simply running away from them. There are rumours, of course, about secret elixirs that bath attendants will add to the water for an extra fee, herbs, salts, or maybe just the contents of whatever was left behind in the lost and found. If you ask, everyone pretends not to know what you mean. As the sweat drips from your nose and pools somewhere between your shoulder blades, you begin to feel lighter, more buoyant, almost optimistic. Is it the heat, the vapour, or the vague hope that you'll finally get the coal dust out of your pores? Maybe all three. You close your eyes and let your troubles evaporate, at least until the next round of bills, gossip, or mysterious Victorian ailments. Occasionally, you brave the cold plunge pool, because nothing says healthy circulation like shocking your system back into full consciousness. The brave and the foolish alike leap in with gasps, shouts, and the occasional creative Victorian profanity. You emerge refreshed, shivering, and briefly convinced you can face another week of bad news and boiled cabbage. By the time you stagger back out into the real world, cheeks glowing and hair wild, you're a new person, or at least a very damp one. Your aches have faded, your lungs are clear, and you're so relaxed you could nap in a hansom cab during rush hour. Maybe it's not a miracle cure, but it's as close as the Victorians get to actual wellness. And so, you wrap up in your robe, sip a final glass of water, and prepare to rejoin society. You're squeaky clean, slightly dazed, and for the moment, wonderfully at peace. In Victorian Britain, sometimes the best remedy isn't found in a bottle, but in a cloud of steam, a friendly towel, and the willingness to sweat it all out. Sleep easy and dream of eucalyptus, distant laughter, and the gentle hiss of a world temporarily set aside. Science is booming, and every amateur chemist is brewing up something in their back room. You sip a neighbour's home-brewed nerve tonic and spend the night turning into a literary metaphor. At least the neighbours are entertained. It's the golden age of invention, but Victorian invention is equal parts innovation, curiosity, and blind optimism. The newspapers are filled with tales of astonishing breakthroughs, new gases discovered, new gadgets patented, and new theories expounded by people with mutton chops and a gleam in their eye. You live on a street where every other door hides an enthusiastic experimenter. The clink of glassware and the faint scent of sulphur are as much a part of the evening as tea and awkward small talk. Your own neighbour. Mr. Pennington is a solicitor by day, mad scientist by night. He's proud of his collection of coloured vials, bubbling jars, and something he calls the Invigorator 3000, which appears to be a teapot wired to a car battery. You drop by for what is innocently described as a restorative cordial. The drink is purple, it smokes slightly, and it tastes like a combination of mint, regret, and the anticipation of a possible insurance claim. One sip in and the world takes on a new clarity. Or maybe you're just blinking at twice the normal rate. The nerve tonic promises to banish lethargy and inspire creativity. For a while, it works. You discuss poetry with unusual enthusiasm, develop radical new ideas for improving the local sewer system, and attempt to recite the entirety of Hamlet in the back garden. Unfortunately, you soon find yourself losing track of your own limbs, speaking in limericks, and possibly turning a worrying shade of chartreuse. The neighbours peek through the curtains, quietly delighted. Nothing like a live demonstration of the dangers of amateur chemistry to liven up a Tuesday night. Victorian Britain is full of Dr. Jekylls, each convinced their personal potion is the answer to the century's woes. Some tonics promise to cure nervous exhaustion, others claim to prolong life, and a few guarantee enhanced moral fortitude, which sounds noble until you realise it just makes you extremely boring at parties. Many are simply a mixture of whatever's on hand. A dash of laudanum, a pinch of cocaine, a spoonful of old port, and a label handwritten in a trembling scrawl. Results vary. Some nights, the neighbourhood is treated to a burst of inspired productivity, windows washed, letters written, entire novels outlined in the space of an hour. Other times, the only thing produced is a lot of enthusiastic drooling and a firm resolution never to trust anyone who uses the word elixir in polite conversation. Side effects are considered part of the adventure. Who needs consistent results when you can have stories to tell and the fleeting thrill of surviving your own curiosity? Even the respectable scientific journals get in on the fun, publishing articles with titles like Unusual Manifestations Following Ingestion of Dr. Crabapple's Restorative Syrup and on the Reversible Personality Effects of Compound X. Medical authorities, meanwhile, issue vague warnings about the dangers of untested remedies before heading home to test a few on themselves. The line between medicine and mischief is thin. Dr. Jekyll is everyone's favourite cautionary tale, a reminder that mixing just a little too much of this with a touch too much of that might leave you, at best, with a remarkable story, and at worst, with a strong urge to avoid mirrors. But in an age when the world seems to reinvent itself every year, who can resist the allure of transformation, even if it means spending the next morning apologising to your landlady for turning her pet canary an interesting shade of blue? So, you tip your hat to the local mad scientists, the enthusiastic brewers, and every brave soul who volunteers to taste test the latest batch. Sleep well, and may your dreams be vivid, your transformations reversible, and your neighbors endlessly forgiving. Not all drugs come in a bottle. Sometimes you slap on a mustard plaster, inhale camphor, or rub goose fat on your chest, because that's what Grandma did, and she only fainted twice a year. It's a damp Victorian evening, and you're feeling unwell. Maybe it's a tickle in your throat, an ache in your bones, or just the vague sense of doom that descends every time the wind rattles the window panes. You're not heading to the chemist or calling for the doctor. Instead, you're consulting the family's real medical authority, Grandma. She stands in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, armed with remedies that have survived plagues, wars, and at least 3 generations of skepticism. First up is the mustard plaster. There's nothing quite like the ritual. A handful of mustard powder, flour, and water, mixed into a paste and slathered onto a bit of cloth. Grandma ties it to your chest with the brisk efficiency of a woman who's delivered twins in a snowstorm. This'll draw out the sickness, she says, ignoring the fact that it also draws out your will to live. Within moments, the skin beneath the plaster is tingling, then burning, then positively on fire. You begin to sweat. Your eyes water. You wonder if this is the cure or the cause. The logic is simple. If the pain in your chest is now a pain on your chest, progress has been made. If that fails, it's time for camphor. Grandma opens a small blue jar and dabs a generous scoop onto a handkerchief. The scent hits you like a brick of medicinal peppermint. You inhale, your sinus is clear, and for a few moments, you're convinced you can see through time. Camphor is the Swiss Army knife of Victorian home remedies. Got a headache? Camphor. Cold feet? Camphor. Ghostly apparitions in the parlor? Try camphor, just in case. By the end of the evening, you and the furniture both smell aggressively restored. And then there's goose fat, nature's all-purpose ointment. Coughing? Goose fat on the chest, under the nose, or, in truly desperate households, stirred into a mug of hot milk. Nobody really knows why this works, but since Grandma made it to 92, nobody's questioning her methods. There's a certain comfort in the slippery, vaguely poultry-scented ritual. The Victorians believe firmly in the power of tradition, even if that tradition occasionally involves smelling like Sunday dinner. Old wives' tales don't stop there. A bit of warm vinegar for sore throats, onion poultices for chest congestion, a hot brick at the foot of the bed for chills. You try them all, one after another, until your bedroom smells like a salad bar in a thunderstorm and you've achieved the rare state of being both roasted and pickled at the same time. No visit from Grandma is complete without her collection of general advice. Feed a cold, starve a fever. Or is it the other way around, she muses, shoving another hot potato under your pillow. Whatever you do, don't get your feet wet or you'll catch your death. She has a poultice for every occasion and a story to go with each, most of which end with, and that's how your Uncle Arthur got his limp. The miracle of these home remedies isn't always in the cure, but in the comfort. The rituals, the warmth, and the firm conviction that if you just follow the routine, you'll wake up feeling better. Maybe it's the mustard. Maybe it's the camphor. Maybe it's simply being wrapped up, fussed over, and reminded that someone believes you're worth the effort. So, as you drift off to sleep swaddled in poultices and tradition, you realize there's a kind of medicine in being looked after. The pain might linger, but so does the memory of being cared for. And in Victorian Britain, that's half the battle. Sleep well, with the faint scent of goose fat and old wives' wisdom drifting through your dreams. You wander into your local chemist, browse the shelves, and select something promising, perhaps Dr. Bicknell's liver invigorator. The ingredients are a secret, the effects are a gamble, and the label features a deeply suspicious sheep. Victorian Britain is an age of innovation, ambition, and a shocking lack of regulations. Your friendly neighbourhood chemist shop is less a pharmacy and more a carnival booth for the desperate and the bored. The air is thick with the aroma of camphor, licorice, and hints of something that might be burnt hair. Glass bottles line the shelves in every colour of the rainbow, promising to cure everything from melancholia to bunions to general malaise, the last being the official diagnosis for anyone who looks tired in a hat. Shopping for medicine here is an adventure. You're not just picking up a prescription, you're entering a lottery, and every bottle is a new ticket. Labels boast secret ingredients known only to Dr. Bicknell, or perhaps to the sheep on the bottle who, judging by its expression, has seen things it can never forget. You try to read the fine print, but it's all in a cheerful script designed to distract you from the lack of actual information. Invigorates the vital humours, purifies the blood, restores your youthful bounce, promises that, if nothing else, will make your obituary more interesting. Today, you select a bottle of Dr. Bicknell's Liver Invigorator, because your liver is Victorian and therefore in a constant state of distress. The chemist, a man whose moustache is at least 80% of his personality, nods approvingly. "Good choice," he says, as if you've just won the sweepstakes. He wraps the bottle in brown paper, slipping in a free sample of Professor Farnsworth's nerve cordial, just in case you survive the first round and want to try your luck again. You take your mystery tonic home, eyeing it with the wary optimism of someone who's bought both a lottery ticket and an umbrella for the same day. The instructions are vague: 1 spoonful for mild symptoms, 2 if you are feeling particularly Victorian. The first taste is shockingly herbal, a slap of bitterness followed by an oddly warming sensation. You pause, wait for divine inspiration, or possibly fireworks. Nothing. 10 minutes later, you feel invigorated, maybe, or possibly just confused. Is this the cure, the cause, or a new category of experience? The Victorians are nothing if not adventurous in their self-care. Your friends share their own discoveries. One swears by Mrs. Flanagan's cholera tonic, which smells faintly of turpentine and regret. Another recommends Professor Plimsoll's nerve restorer, the secret ingredient of which is either unicorn horn or a splash of brandy, depending on the chemist's mood. The stories abound. I took 2 doses and my gout vanished. But now I can only speak in rhymes, says Mr. Wilkins at the pub. I gave it to my cat and now he refuses to come inside, reports Mrs. Endicott. Side effects are not so much listed as implied by the label's artistic choices. Grinning cherubs for mild results, sheep for the truly unpredictable, and the occasional skull for those who like their medicine with a side of drama. If things go sideways, you simply blame your constitution and try something else tomorrow. Despite the risks, there's a certain thrill in the unknown. Victorian life is repetitive, coal dust, tepid tea, and endless drizzle, so why not add a little excitement? Perhaps today's remedy will clear your skin, calm your nerves, or make you sprout a second set of eyebrows. Either way, you'll have a story, a souvenir, and a renewed appreciation for labels that list more than just miscellaneous botanical marvels. So tonight, as you tuck your bottle of liver invigorator under your pillow, remember, in Victorian Britain, health is a game of chance, and every chemist's shop is the entrance to a magical and slightly suspicious world. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as lively as a bottle of mystery tonic. Sunrise in Victorian Britain. Your head is pounding, your vision is blurred, and your pocket is empty. Time to visit the chemist for a quick pick-me-up. The cycle continues. You vow never to do it again, until lunchtime. The light streaming through your soot-streaked window is unreasonably bright, as if the sun itself has a personal vendetta. Somewhere in the alley, someone is playing the accordion, badly, and the distant clatter of horse hooves pounds in time with the throbbing inside your skull. You roll over and try to remember last night, but it's all a kaleidoscopic blur of drinks, dubious syrups, and a passionate debate about the merits of arsenic face powder. Victorian nightlife is relentless. If you weren't drinking gin at the pub, you were sampling medicinal wines, toasting with absinthe at an artist's garret, or, if things got really out of hand, sharing a round of Dr. Jekyll's special cordial at your neighbour's latest experiment. No matter what your poison, the morning after is always the same: regret, dehydration, and a determination to never, ever trust anyone who claims to have invented a new digestive elixir. You stagger to the wash basin, splash your face, and take inventory. You're still alive, mostly. Your tongue feels like old carpet. Your hair has achieved new and innovative shapes, and there's a suspiciously unfamiliar shoe by the bed. If only there were a cure. But this is Victorian Britain. Of course there's a cure, or at least 25 of them, conveniently sold over the counter. Enter the chemist, hero of the hungover and the hopelessly withdrawn. You shuffle in, avoiding eye contact, and mumble something about the nerves. The chemist, who has seen this routine daily since the dawn of time, reaches beneath the counter for his most popular potions. Reverend Splendid's morning tonic, Mrs. Winslow's gentle restorative, and, if you're feeling especially fragile, a generous dose of Vin Mariani, guaranteed to put the spring back in your step and the twitch back in your eyebrow. The ritual is soothing, if not particularly scientific. One bottle for the headache, another for the shakes, and a third to take the edge off the realization that you may have volunteered to host tonight's supper club. The contents are a blend of alcohol, opium, coca leaves, and, just for fun, a little quinine for that healthy bitterness. If you're especially unlucky, someone recommends a dose of mercury pills for intestinal vigor. You politely decline and vow to change your circle of friends. Withdrawal is the Victorian guest that never leaves. The shakes, the sweats, the sudden urge to write poetry at 4 a.m, all par for the course after a night on the town. You're not alone. Your neighbour, Mr. Wilkins, can be found every morning on his front stoop, clutching a mug of strong tea and muttering about the dangers of overindulgence. Miss Hargreaves swears by pickled onions and a brisk walk around the block, but you suspect her solution is mostly an excuse to gossip. The cycle is familiar. Hangover, regret, resolve, relapse. By mid-morning, your promises of sobriety are already fading. By lunchtime, you're back at the chemist, seeking out a tonic for clarity and something to steady the hands. The shopkeeper gives you a knowing nod and slips you a bottle with a label that says, simply, best taken with lunch. You don't ask what's in it. In Victorian Britain, sometimes ignorance is truly medicinal. But for all its pitfalls, there's a certain camaraderie in suffering. You and your friends gather to share stories, compare cures, and toast the indestructible optimism that keeps you coming back for more. As the afternoon sun slants through the grimy window, you raise a glass of something fizzy, bittersweet, and possibly radioactive, and resolve, one last time, to turn over a new leaf, or at least to make it to dinner. Sleep well, and may your dreams be gentle, your remedies effective, and your memory forgiving, at least until tomorrow's sunrise. Boarding a Victorian train is an adventure in itself, but the real journey begins at the buffet car. Here, you're encouraged to sip a little sherry for the nerves as the countryside whips by. By the second stop, the whole compartment is giggling, someone's reading poetry, and you're reasonably sure the engineer is on his 4th glass. Safety first, unless you count liver safety. It's the golden age of British rail, and you're off for a day in the country, or maybe a cross-country escape from your own relatives. The station is a swirl of steam, bustle, and passengers clutching mysterious parcels. The conductor checks your ticket and you board, settling into a velvet seat with a window view of grey fields, distant sheep, and whatever the British weather is doing that hour. But before the train even leaves the station, there's an announcement. The refreshment car is now open. Victorians everywhere snap to attention. The buffet car is a marvel of civilization and temptation. The menu features all the essentials: sherry, port, brandy, more sherry, and for the cautious, weak tea, food is secondary. The sandwiches are as dry as legal parchment, the biscuits could double as construction material, and the ham looks suspiciously like it died of natural causes. No matter what you really came for is the liquid hospitality. Every other passenger seems to have received the same memo. You order a sherry for the nerves. So does your neighbour. The clink of glasses becomes the unofficial anthem of Victorian train travel. Your initial anxiety about travelling in a high-speed, boiler-powered metal tube melts away. By the first tunnel, you're toasting with strangers, sharing family secrets, and agreeing with a woman in tartan that yes, Scotland does have the best mist. By the second stop, the whole carriage is a cheerful, wobbly society. Someone unpacks a deck of cards, a bearded gentleman recites poetry with growing gusto, and the governess in the corner is giggling behind her handkerchief. Your fellow passengers enthusiastically debate philosophy, current events, and the questionable freshness of the scones. All of it happens over generous servings of port, and nobody quite remembers who started the third round. Meanwhile, the engineer, heroic, red-cheeked, and, you hope, still able to tell left from right, wanders through for his refreshment break. He is greeted like an old friend and sent back to the engine with a parting tot of brandy for courage. In an era before breathalyzers, the only real safety device is collective optimism and the hope that the rails, like British etiquette, are stubbornly straight. Things escalate. The train takes a sharp corner and everyone laughs as tea spills, cards scatter, and your new best friend swears never to travel sober again. Someone starts singing a folk tune. By now, half the carriage is convinced they can see double, but that's just the windows fogging up. The scenery blurs, the fields look greener, and even the sheep seem to be grinning at your revelry. As the journey continues, travellers trade remedies for hangovers, heartache, and the dreaded railway tummy. Someone swears by a nip of whiskey before every tunnel. Another insists that gin mixed with ginger ale cures any complaint, including annoying seatmates. There's a sense of camaraderie, of shared adventure, and, occasionally, shared confusion when you find yourself in the wrong compartment with a cheese sandwich and someone else's umbrella. By the time you reach your destination, you are relaxed, possibly tipsy, and not entirely sure how many new friends you've made. You stumble off the train with a fuzzy sense of accomplishment, a pocket full of ticket stubs, and a determination to repeat the experience on your next journey. So as you tumble into your hotel, or the arms of waiting relatives, remember, in Victorian Britain, every railway journey is a rolling party. The tracks may be straight, but the stories you collect along the way will never be. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as merry as a compartment full of travellers, a buffet car full of sherry, and a country rolling by in a tipsy blur. Feeling jittery, woke up nervous, or maybe just woke up? Reach for the nearest nerve tonic, likely a blend of alcohol, opiates, bitters, and something labelled secret botanical essence. The pharmacist promises it'll calm your heart, soothe your intestines, and possibly transport you to the astral plane. Modern problems, Victorian solutions. Life in Victorian Britain is an ongoing experiment in nervous exhaustion. Maybe it's the relentless fog, the ceaseless clatter of carriages, or the fact that your neighbour's parrot knows all the words to God Save the Queen but refuses to sing in tune. Whatever the cause, you're a bundle of nerves. You wake up anxious, you eat lunch anxious, you go to bed anxious, only to dream of more anxiety, plus a side of indigestion. That's where nerve tonic comes in. The miracle cure for everyone and everything. There's a bottle on every nightstand, shop counter, and kitchen table, promising tranquility and well-being in a world designed for neither. Each label boasts claims bolder than the last. Restores the spirit. Strengthens the mind. Settles the stomach, the nerves, and occasionally disputes with your landlord. You are tempted, of course you are. Who wouldn't want to wash away a hard day with a little medicinal comfort? You visit your neighbourhood chemist, where the shelves are lined with solutions to every emotional and gastrointestinal woe. The pharmacist, an unflappable soul with eyebrows that could brush the ceiling, recommends Professor Fuddlemore's celebrated nerve tonic. He assures you it's perfect for anxiety, heartburn, romantic disappointments, and that hollow feeling you get when you realise your umbrella has gone missing again. You uncork the bottle and pour a measure into a glass. The aroma is a strange mix, medicinal, herbal, sweet, and just a hint of something mysterious. which according to the label is the secret botanical essence. The first sip burns slightly, then warms you from the inside out. Almost immediately, the edges of your nerves begin to dull. Your worries, which just moments ago felt like a herd of stampeding cattle, now seem more like distant sheep. Your stomach calms, your hands stop trembling, and you feel, if not happy, at least less likely to throw your hat at someone in a fit of pique. Victorian nerve tonics aren't just for personal use. They're social. At tea parties, someone always has a restorative cordial on hand, just in case the conversation turns to politics or the vicar's latest sermon. Businessmen fortify themselves with a nip before meetings. Mothers keep a bottle handy for anything from female complaints to the sound of children arguing over who gets the last biscuit. It's a public secret that most so-called digestive aids are really just fancy nerve tonics with better branding. Of course, moderation is an afterthought. Take too much, and you might find yourself confessing your innermost feelings to the coat rack, or convinced you've solved the problem of gravity. Some evenings end with a contented nap on the sofa. Others, with a firm resolution to try a different blend next time, especially after you realise the botanical essence in Professor Fuddlemore's recipe is mostly wormwood and wishful thinking. Side effects are rarely discussed. A little drowsiness, the occasional odd dream, and perhaps a tendency to hum softly at inopportune moments. But who's keeping track? In an era where nerves are stretched tighter than a violin string, any solution is worth a try. And so, as the evening settles and the city quiets, you pour yourself a final dose. The tonic hums gently through your veins, smoothing out the rough edges of Victorian life. You sigh, content, and let the day's anxieties drift away, until tomorrow's worries arrive, punctual as ever with the morning post. Sleep well, and may your dreams be free of nerves, indigestion, and mysterious botanical ingredients. Or at least, may you wake up convinced they are. Children deserve a treat after a hard day in the chimney or factory, right? Fortunately, Victorian sweet shops have just the thing. Candies and syrups dosed with codeine and opium to help with coughs, tantrums, and the existential horror of being 8 in 1872. You wonder why the kids are so quiet at dinner. Mystery solved. Let's step into a Victorian sweet shop, bright, bustling, and as full of temptation as it is questionable pharmacology. The shelves are lined with jars of striped sticks, lozenges, and the sort of chewy sweets you could chip a tooth on. But hidden among the licorice whirls and barley sugars are the era's true wonders, candies laced with a little something extra. The pharmacist-turned-confectioner smiles knowingly as you purchase a handful of calmative caramels and soothing syrup lollies, each promising not just good behaviour but blissful, uninterrupted silence. You might think these are treats reserved for special occasions. You'd be wrong. In Victorian Britain, a dose of codeine or opium is just another tool in the parents' arsenal, right alongside stern looks and the occasional threat to send you to Australia. A cough? Candy? A tantrum? Lollipop. Trouble sleeping because your bunk bed is an actual bunk in a coal cellar? Have a soothing syrup, darling, and don't forget to share with your little brother. The ingredients are right there on the label sometimes. If not, the hints are in the brand names. Mrs. Winslow's Quiet Child Drops, Dr. Tiddle's Tranquilizing Taffy, or simply Nurse's Night Off Bonbons. A few are even flavoured with wintergreen or orange peel. But you know the real magic is what you can't taste. Victorian children don't mind. In a world of long days, cold rooms, and unpredictable meat pies, a bit of chemical comfort is just part of growing up. Side effects? There are plenty, but nobody's keeping notes. The kids sleep like angels, have mysterious floating afternoons, and develop a vague, dreamy disinterest in family drama. The only real hazard is that someone occasionally nods off into their soup or forgets what they were arguing about halfway through a squabble. You might have to gently nudge them awake at the table, but at least they aren't bickering over the last potato. And it's not just the children. Teachers discreetly keep a stash of coughing pastilles in their desk drawers. ready to distribute to fidgety pupils or anyone who dares to sneeze during recitation. Nurses slip syrup into bedtime milk, and nannies thank the heavens for every quiet afternoon nap, crediting good behavior to Victorian discipline, by which they mean opium and codeine in every pocket. Modern sensibilities might gasp, but for the harried Victorian parent, these medicated treats are a sanity-saving godsend. After all, a world where children are expected to work, scrub, haul and mind their elders with unblinking politeness is a world where a little chemically assisted quiet time seems frankly merciful. Of course, there's always one child, the family's aspiring rebel, who builds up a tolerance and spends the afternoon rearranging the furniture or teaching the cat to sing Rule Britannia. But even they eventually succumb to the gentle lull of a codeine bonbon, slipping into slumber with a smile and a sticky chin. As the gas lamps flicker and the city quiets, you listen to the peaceful hush from the children's room. No night terrors, no coughing fits, just the soft, collective exhale of a generation gently subdued by the wonders of Victorian science and a pinch of questionable ethics. So tonight, as you tuck in your little ones, or, more likely, retrieve them from wherever they've dozed off, remember, in Victorian Britain, a spoonful of sugar really does help the medicine go down. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as sweet and as peaceful as a codeine-laced caramel from the children's corner. The Victorians are obsessed with electricity, so much so that they'll strap you into a contraption and run a mild current through your limbs for vitality. It tingles, it buzzes, and nobody really knows if it works. But the advertisement shows a smiling man with an excellent moustache. Who needs caffeine when you've got a home lightning storm? Let's set the scene. It's 1875, and science is the new magic. Electricity has just arrived in the public imagination, along with 1,000 new inventions, a few actual fires, and at least one unplanned hairdo for the family cat. The latest craze isn't just reading by electric light, it's running electricity through your actual body in the name of health. You pop into your neighborhood's most progressive health spa, or, failing that, your friend's back parlor, recently rebranded as the Vitalizing Institute, to try the miracle of electrotherapy. The therapeutic equipment is an eclectic mix of wires, paddles, mysterious dials, and if the operator is especially enterprising, parts from last year's failed automatic shoe polisher. Your practitioner, whose knowledge of electricity comes mostly from penny dreadfuls and bold experimentation, assures you that everything is perfectly safe. You just need to sit, relax, and not touch anything metal that isn't already attached to you. Electrotherapy is the Victorian answer to just about everything. Tired, anxious, plagued by female hysteria or male ennui? There's a setting for that. The machine hums to life, and you feel the unmistakable tingle as a mild current pulses through your arms and legs. That's your vitality returning. The practitioner beams as you involuntarily salute, tap dance, or possibly just develop an excellent party trick. For those who can afford it, there are even at-home models, shipped in enormous boxes with instructions in 6 languages and a helpful diagram of a gentleman who looks suspiciously like he's regretting all his life choices. You're told to apply the paddles to areas of sluggishness and set the dial to invigorate. Side effects may include mild euphoria, sudden insights, or the urge to alphabetize your pantry. The medical community is divided, which is Victorian for everyone's having a go. Some doctors are convinced electricity can cure everything from gout to indigestion, while others point out that most patients just leave with better posture and a renewed appreciation for sitting still. The advertisements are relentless. Restore your spark, feel younger instantly, recommended by at least 3 baronets. Each one features a portrait of a robust man with a moustache that could anchor a small schooner and a look of eternal optimism. Electrotherapy quickly becomes a social event. Friends gather to take turns with the electromagnetic vitality enhancer, daring each other to crank up the dial and giggling as their hair stands on end. Parties end with a rousing round of guess which limb is numb. There's gossip about Lady Thornton's miraculous recovery from lethargy, though the fact that she now jumps at the sound of thunder is left politely unmentioned. Of course, there are skeptics. Grandpa claims the whole thing is just a fancy way to get out of honest labour, and points out he's lived to 80 with nothing but beef broth and spite. You, meanwhile, are just happy for the distraction. Even if you're not fully cured, you've gained a great story and a temporary escape from the endless cycle of Victorian aches and worries. By the end of your session, you feel buzzy, bright, and slightly toasted, like a scone left too long in the range. The practitioner unhooks you, assures you of your renewed vital energy, and suggests a weekly appointment. You step out into the evening air, heart racing, hair frazzled, ready to face the next foggy morning. So as you tuck yourself in tonight, gently vibrating and perhaps glowing faintly in the dark, remember, in Victorian Britain, wellness sometimes means letting science literally run through you. Sleep well, and may your dreams be lively, sparky, and absolutely free of unexpected static shocks. You've made it to Bath, or Harrogate, or some other town famous for its healing springs. You take a cautious gulp of the warm, metallic, egg-scented water, told it will fix everything from gout to heartbreak. Instead, you get a sulphur burp and a suspicious tummy rumble. Still, nothing says wellness like a public bath with 300 strangers and the distant threat of cholera. Arriving in a Victorian spa town is like stumbling into a particularly damp parade. There's an air of forced optimism, crowds in their finest hats, and a general sense that everyone's here for something slightly different. Illness, romance, or simply a break from Aunt Mildred's opinions. The moment you set foot in Bath or Harrogate, you're swept up in a schedule of drinking, soaking, walking, and the occasional compulsory stroll around a park while pretending you're not freezing. You've heard the stories. The mineral-rich waters can cure what ails you, whether it's rheumatism, melancholy, or general fatigue of the spirit. Doctors, with impressive beards and even more impressive confidence, insist that a few days taking the waters will transform you. The reality is a little less glamorous. You line up for your cup of hot, faintly yellow liquid, trying not to think about what's floating in it. You raise the glass, take a brave sip, and instantly regret every life choice that led you to this moment. It's warm, salty, and tastes exactly like a boiled shilling left in a chicken coop. The attendant assures you this is the taste of wellness. You're unconvinced, but your fellow guests nod in grim solidarity, one eye on the nearest privy. The baths themselves are communal affairs, grand halls tiled in blue and white, full of steam, echoes, and strangers in every stage of polite undress. You join the herd, lowering yourself into the water with practiced resignation. It's not unpleasant, provided you enjoy the sensation of being gently poached alongside merchants, nobility, and at least 3 people loudly discussing the merits of cod liver oil. Conversation drifts from current gossip to miraculous cures, with everyone claiming to know a cousin who walked in with a limp and walked out with a fiancé and slightly damp shoes. Victorian spa towns are a world unto themselves. Each day begins with a healing glass of water, followed by prescribed walks, baths, and treatments with terrifyingly optimistic names: galvanic stimulation, effervescent inhalation, or the ominous steam pummel. You try them all. One session leaves your skin redder than a boiled beet. Another has you convinced your aches are simply hiding, waiting for a train home. The one constant is the sound of gurgling stomachs and the hope that whatever doesn't kill you will at least justify the expense. The social side is just as important as the treatments. Evenings are spent promenading with fellow sufferers, comparing sulfuric aftertastes, and speculating about which of the local doctors is secretly a magician. Romance blossoms over tepid mineral water, alliances are forged in the queue for the Roman plunge, and friendships are sealed by mutual digestive distress. There's nothing quite like a shared near miss with Victorian plumbing to bond 2 souls. And if, after a week of sulphur, steam, and mildly embarrassing incidents, you don't feel better, well, the town chemist is ready with tonics, powders, and possibly a room temperature gin to ease your return to regular life. You might not be cured, but you'll have a full set of anecdotes, a new appreciation for fresh air, and the knowledge that you once braved the mysterious waters and lived to tell the tale. So as you dry off, sip your last heroic glass and prepare to return to the chaos of daily life. Remember, in Victorian Britain, wellness is a team sport, best played with a strong stomach and a sense of humour. Sleep well, and may your dreams be less sulphurous, more restful, and entirely free of communal footbaths. It's the end of another long, foggy day in Victorian Britain. You've survived the potions, powders, and positively baffling syrups. Maybe you tried a dash of laudanum for your nerves, a spoonful of arsenic for your complexion, and a glass of gin to wash down the regret. Or maybe you're just exhausted from reading the ingredients on your invigorating tonic and realizing most of them are now illegal in 16 countries. As you settle into bed, tucked in with your very own hot water bottle, mercifully not filled with chloroform, take a quiet moment to be grateful. Grateful for clean water, painkillers that don't contain mercury, and the fact that no one's grandma is offering you cocaine for your cough. You made it through the gauntlet of Victorian pharmaceuticals, and all you got was a killer hangover and, hopefully, a little perspective. It's easy to laugh at the past, and let's be honest, we do. A lot. But behind every wild remedy was someone just trying to get by, get better, or simply get some sleep. The Victorians were stubborn, hopeful, and more than a little desperate for relief in a world that never really slowed down. If nothing else, tonight is a reminder that our ancestors were incredibly creative, occasionally reckless, and always a little bit ridiculous. So as you drift off to sleep in your clean, comfortable bed, maybe whisper a thank you to history's accidental pharmacists and the long line of people who survived so you could enjoy modern medicine. The world may still be confusing and a little bit bonkers, but at least your cough syrup won't make you hallucinate green fairies. Rest easy, sleep well, and remember, sometimes the strangest chapters of history are the ones that bring us the most comfort and the best stories. Good night.